we need money bad to develop real production quality devices, where you use injection molded plastic instead of 3D printed plastic. And there's a lot of upfront capital, a lot of upfront money needed to make that happen. And so for 6 months, I changed from being a salesman trying to sell devices to being a salesman for the company and saying, hey, look what we've done. We think we can do way better. We just need some more money. And so I raised almost $500,000 over 6 months around this idea. So we were raising on the fact that we were in a few hundred clinics. We've sold to several pro sports teams, and there's this giant market for people with neck issues.
From the time he was a physical therapy student, Scott Dickinson had a vision, one born out of frustration, long clinical hours, and a simple realization. When it comes to neck pain, the tools available just weren't cutting it. But Scott wasn't one to simply shrug off a problem, especially not when it affected so many of his patients. In 2018, while still in school, Scott began sketching out ideas for a device that could change the way people approached neck rehab. It was nothing more than a rough concept at the time, inspired by a manual therapy technique he'd seen during his clinical rotations. Little did he know, this idea, scribbled in a notebook, would soon consume the next 6 years of his life. After graduating from USC's physical therapy program, Scott moved back home to Philadelphia, where he entered an orthopedic residency at the University of Delaware. But even as he threw himself into residency, Scott couldn't let go of that initial idea. So, in the small, cramped space of his parents' garage, he began prototyping his invention, a neck rehab device that would become to be known as Next Level. By 2021, Scott had hand-assembled the first working model using 3D printed parts, metal, and even a cut-up yoga mat. His early prototypes were rough around the edges, but they worked, and they worked well. Clinics and even professional sports teams like the Philadelphia Eagles started taking notice. Yet, despite these early successes, Scott was struggling to make ends meet, working full-time as a PT by day and spending every spare moment refining and selling Next Level. But the real turning point came in 2022 when Scott realized he needed to take a leap of faith. He raised $450,000 from friends, family, and his network, allowing him to leave his clinical job and focus entirely on Next Level. It was a gamble, but one that's paid off. Today, Next Level is not only used by top-tier athletes, but it's also helping people all over the world manage chronic neck pain from the comfort of their own homes. Scott's journey is one of grit, determination, and unwavering commitment to his vision. It's a story of how a simple idea, born out of necessity, grew into a company that's revolutionizing neck rehab. And it all started in a garage with a dream and a lot of hard work.
Hey, Jimmy, thanks for having me. Been a big fan of yours for a while, so I'm honored here.
It's weird to hear. It's weird to hear because I still think I'm just talking to myself in my kitchen a lot. But I'm watching everything. I'm watching everything fly by, and I'm just talking, and I realize people actually listen to this. But maybe that's the theme of not only this episode, but this week, which is the little thing that you have in your head or your heart, or both, can go out into the world and have a pretty big ripple across places that you as an individual might not have ever gotten to in this thing that you created. So let's start super high level, pretend no one has any idea who you are and what you did. What did you create? What is the thing that you went from idea to reality? Describe your product, and then we'll talk about deeper about how that actually happened.
Yeah, so I'm a physical therapist, and I invented a neck strengthening device. And the easiest way to think of that, if we only have audio to serve us, would be it's like a reformer, like a Pilates reformer, that sliding deck with the resistance cords. It's like that, but it's for your neck. And so you lie down and you rest your head on this smaller reformer, and you can do different neck strengthening exercises, gravity eliminated. So when you lie down, of course, all of gravity's compression forces are released. And so we found that people with neck issues do a lot better rehabbing on their back or on their stomach than they would otherwise in an upright position. So
And
that's what I do.
in that description, you did not use the word skateboard at all. It was 0 times, but a skateboard had something to do with this, right? Somewhere along the line?
Yes, certainly. So the first prototype, the first official prototype was simply my skateboard. So I'm a skateboarder. I was obsessed with skateboarding growing up. I spent a lot of time learning and harnessing the craft of skateboarding. And so I always had that with me. And it just so happened that that was like the perfect first prototype because I needed a sliding deck, something that had very low friction that would move underneath my head when I turned my head back and forth, rotation. And when I lied down, it just so happens that the skateboard fits right there underneath your head. You can turn back and forth, and it's like a moving pillow. And I was like, "Oh wow, this feels like better than I thought it would. It feels better than it probably should." And then I put, the grip tape was kind of rough on my hair, of course, so I put a towel down, and I was like, "Hey mom," because I was living with my parents at the time. "Hey mom, would you try this as well?" "Hey dad," and everyone was like, "Yeah, this feels like pretty good." So it was like a green light to just keep on going. But I will tell you that I was even that moment was pretty scary just to just could easily fail and that didn't feel good and then my whole idea
Sure.
is
Well, you
trash.
said something right there, and I like to key in on words because I'm a words guy. You said green light, and that means you were looking for. It sounds like you were looking for permission to maybe take this idea. And we do this a lot. This is not just in product development, but like you're sort of looking around the room and you're seeing or trying to see. Does someone else see or feel the same thing that I see and feel? Do I have that? Is that kind of you're nodding, but do I have that right?
100%. Yeah, I think of the early days as just a series of green lights where I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know if I was on the right track, but it always just felt right to keep going towards the next step. And whenever that step would come, I would test it out. I would try the new prototype. I would show it to a new neighbor, and it was always the signal to keep going. It was always there, and so that was the motivation. And early on it was just do something every day because I had never gone into this world. I was working as a full-time clinician. My mind was in many places, but I promised myself in the early days of prototyping, do one thing, could be very small, send one email,
Hmm.
try one new prototype, whatever, just do one thing every day. And then that grew and grew and grew as this thing took root.
Do you ever see the movie The Martian with Matt Damon?
Yes.
Sounds like that, where he's like, listen, you solve a problem and then you solve another one and you solve another one. But if you look at it from, hey, I've got to solve 500 problems, you'd probably never get started. But the approach that you had, and so did Matt Damon when he was stranded on Mars, was just solve the one in front of me, which is the biggest problem. What is the one closest to me that I need to solve? Is it food or water or oxygen in Matt Damon's case? But in your case, it was all these different product development or different product problems along the way. So let's get to the story though. So resistance bands are good, or if you look at your website, you got a guy, holding the resistance band and he's
Mhm.
not liking it. It sort of gets the job done, but not well enough. And then when your head was sort of on that skateboard, you said, hey, listen, I don't know what this is, but something's there because this is giving me emotion. If I could somehow make this skateboard, which is frictionless, if I could put some resistance behind it, we might have something. So after mom and dad of course, they're going to be in your corner. Of course, mom and dad are going to give you a green light. There are ultimate green lights, hopefully, most of the time. But where did things go next? Because now you're starting to I don't want to say you're step out of your comfort zone. You were taking your clinical comfort zone into a different place, sort of wrapping it around yourself like a hamster ball. Like, okay, I know what I'm trying to do or why I'm trying to do it, but I don't know where to go next. So how did you take that first step into saying, hey, I'm going to see how far this goes into actually developing a tangible thing?
Yeah, well, it goes back to PT school. And a lot of this has been emotional, like a gut feeling. And I remember very vividly, I was in Scottsdale, Arizona at Rehab Plus, a clinic, and I had a patient with cervical radiculopathy. And my instructor was like, you could try some resistance band exercises for her neck. And I was like, okay, we'll try that out. And we like mangled together this band
Yeah.
around her head, and I pulled on it, and she didn't like that, and then she pulled on it, and it just felt terrible. I felt uncomfortable giving her the exercise. She certainly didn't like the exercise, and it was that feeling that like, oh, this is like embarrassing for my profession that I'm going into. Like it
Right.
really bothered me to my core, and then also like chin tucks. they're a great exercise when done properly and when you get the patient to buy in. But man, that's a tough sell for some patients. And man, they have a tough time isolating that movement. And so just like, you know, all these little exercises that like they're there and they're potentially good, but none of them really clicked every time. And I was like, I feel like there's this massive market here. I wasn't thinking like that. I didn't have those business words in my head at the
Right.
time. I was a pure PT student. I knew anatomy and I knew manual therapy and I knew kinesiology, nothing of the business world. But that was like the fire. I was like, boy, this didn't feel right. And it was a feel thing. And so as I got back for residency, back to the East Coast for residency at University of Delaware, I spent the weekends after clinic prototyping, thinking, and that was where it took root. And then I had a neighbor say like, "Hey, I really like this prototype here. I've been using it every day, and it really helps my neck. I get so much tension, and I bike a lot. I really like this. Can I buy it from you?" I was like, "What?" That thing is like, it was ugly. It worked really well. It was super smooth, but it was hideous. And he's like, "Yeah, I'd like to keep it." I was like, "Wow, now that's a green light."
There's
Talk
a
about
green
green
light. Yeah.
lights. So I was like, geez, I think I'm onto something. And of course, working as a clinician seems to put the right patients in front of you to do what you need to do at that
Yeah.
stage in your life. I don't know how that works. But of course, I'm starting to treat a machinist at the time. And the machinist knew the right people in my area to do some early prototyping. So he knew another machinist that was retired that just enjoyed prototyping. And so we worked together, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what the right price for a prototype would be. I had no idea how much to spend for each prototype. And bear in mind, I was a resident, so I was making half of a PT's normal salary, living with my parents, and so fresh out of grad school. So I didn't have a ton of money to throw at this thing, and I didn't even know if I should be. It still felt really scary to even throw $100 at something, let alone like $1,000 on a single
Right.
prototype. So I'm moving and I'm dancing and I'm thinking about all this stuff for months, and we're moving through prototypes. And eventually I just like committed to it. I was like, this, I gotta do this. Like, this feels right. I think I'm onto something. We'll get somewhere. Stop worrying about these, like all the money that you're throwing into it. Like, you got to really dive in here. And so ever since then, it was like, it moved from do something every day to like spend as much time per day on this task as you
Yeah.
can, because this is the path.
If you work in outpatient PT, you interact with your EMR a lot. You deserve to have an experience that's seamless and integrates all the things you might need to do, like a patient portal, marketing automations, and billing, all in one, all at an unbeatable value. That's what MW Therapy does. Switching over is a breeze. Take a test drive right now and see what you could do with them at mwtherapy.com. Now, where's your PT career license taking you? Get a driver's license, you can drive wherever you want. If you're a physical therapist with a license, you can provide physical therapy wherever you want. That's what Jackson Therapy Partners is there to do. Extraordinary patient care adventures with Jackson Therapy Partners. Perfect for PTs eager to make their mark. Do what you want to do, where you want to do it. See where your skills can take you at jacksontherapy.com. And if you've heard about this thing, we've had it on the show before. It's called remote therapeutic monitoring. And it could boost your clinic's revenue and help more people. Those two things are good. Find out how Physiotech can help you do that. That is Physiotech at their website, physiotech.ca. That's physiotech.ca. Maybe boost your revenues, your clinic's revenue by $290 per patient per quarter now with Physiotech.
It feels like you found a problem that you thought was worthy of being solved that no one had solved yet, right? I mean, as you're describing wrapping a resistance band around your patient's head, I can envision just how clunky and awkward and yet works. Not really, though. I see what you're trying to do there. And now you feel this, and you used smooth or frictionless, right, as the motion. And you're saying, hey, this feels like a better path to get these really meaningful movements, to get these, we know when they're, as you said, when they're done correctly, they can be really powerful for some people with some specific cervical issues. And I feel like that thing sort of took root in your brain and kept building and saying, no one's built this better mousetrap. Why not me? Why not here? Why not this? I'm curious though, when that switch flipped, when you said you were hemming and hawing and you were doing a little bit, was there something that happened that made you say, hey, okay, I'm not going to just throttle this a little bit. I'm going to go all in. I'm really going to push the gas. Was there anything internal or external that actually happened? Was there a moment?
There was $1,000 spent on
Yeah.
prototypes, and I didn't know if I could get it to be as smooth as I wanted it to be. That was like, I was obsessed with this frictionless feel. And a lot of the prototypes that the machinist and I had worked through were too, the friction was just too high, and I was unhappy. And I was like, George, this just doesn't work. And so I didn't know if I was going to be able to make the product what I wanted it to be. So that was like a big worry for me. And then over time, we got smarter. And you know, the rowing machines that you put your butt on, and that's the movement part.
Sure.
Those are super smooth. And I took note of that. And so I stole that kind of design. And with that, you know, probably 6 months into prototyping, I finally had it like feeling like I wanted it to. Yeah. And from there, I spent a good bit of money to make 5 of them. And with those 5 prototypes, I shipped them out to all of my PT friends from grad school, who are all treating in clinics at this point. And, you know, by the grace of God, they all said yes. And they all put it in their clinic, which is kind of crazy. You know, this is a prototype. It was certainly functional. It didn't look super pretty, but it did the job. And so, you know, they're all out in the world now in the clinic, potentially being used. Maybe a month goes by, and then my friend's patient says, hey, I want to buy one of these. This has made a huge difference for me. And I was like, okay, all right, come on, Scott, sack up here. You know, you're clearly onto something. And so, you know, I would say once I had it feeling like I needed it to, that was a huge confidence booster for me. So I really leaned in after that.
We're doing these sort of in the flavor or in the style of NPR's great show, How I Built This, right? It's just a simple concept going backwards and talking about something that actually came to fruition. And the parallels that I see, because I've listened to most of those episodes, in terms of organizations that have become successful, and this is a great lesson, is you weren't focused on the thing 10 miles from now. You were focused on product. You were like, I need this to feel a certain way or I can't move on. I'm sure you could have it. You could have had it okay. You could have had it worked. It works. Yeah. Look, it works. But you were obsessed with not just working. It needed to work to a level that you were okay with putting out into the world. It sounds like you're saying that.
Yes. And I have like this really sensitive personality. Like I really feel things. Like when I interact with something or interact with a person, I always have a feeling around that. And every little thing that I'm feeling, my neck is feeling, my head is feeling, like that goes into this book for me where I'm assuming that everyone else feels the same way when they're doing it. So why would anybody recommend the product once they've bought it if it doesn't feel exactly as good as it could? So I really couldn't sign off on it, like from a moral standpoint, from like putting my own effort behind something until it felt as good as I needed it to.
Now from the business side, you don't get a second shot. You don't really usually get a second bite at the apple. What I mean by that is even if you would send it out to 5 friends who really liked you and it felt B- or B+ good, right? You coming back to them in 6 months or a year and saying, hey, I got it a little better. It's still hard, right? So it sounds as if you said, listen, I'm gonna get one bite at the apple here. I'm going to make it my best shot. And you didn't stop until you had it where you were like, I could stamp my name on this and stand behind how it feels.
And it's funny because, you know, how you say like, they always say you wouldn't call your own baby ugly. Right. And I really did have those glasses on. Like I had a tough time looking at the product. I thought it looked beautiful. I thought it was amazing because it came from nothing and it was good enough for me. I cared about the feel way more than I cared about how it looked. Mm-hmm. So once the feel was there, and the functionality was there. You could change the resistance bands in a matter of seconds. The smoothness was on point. It was really level, so it didn't click and clang as you used it. So all those check boxes were checked. And then it didn't look that great. But I didn't even, my glasses were on. I had no idea that my baby was ugly. And so it was out in the world being used and people liked it. But then like I would get some feedback like, yeah, now you should make this into a finished product. And I was like, ooh, ouch. I didn't know that that didn't look like a finished product. But then like I was able to kind of reframe and be like, okay, now I have to go on another marathon because I
Sure.
have the design there. Now I have to make it aesthetically pleasing, which is a huge deal. You know, you wish it weren't, but it does matter.
And this feels like another skill set that's not necessarily traditionally taught in physical therapy school, right? So, but it is, isn't it? Because we take a class that we put two words together all the time, which is anatomy and physiology, form and function. So sounds like you focused on physiology and function first, and then you went back to the anatomy. You're like, okay, how do I wrap some skin on this and make it look decent, make it look as good as it feels, make it look as good as it functions, and make it look like someone should take a few steps closer and try this out. Because once they do, you already have that problem solved. You had feel and function solved.
I'm glad you say that. I've never really thought about it like that. But like, you're totally right. That's exactly how it played out.
Were there any chaos moments? I mean, there had to be, right? Because everything can't go as smoothly. See what I did there? Can't go as smoothly as as maybe a script. There's got to be some. There's always forks in the road. There's chances for you to make a left and go become successful and make a right, and it could be disaster. What were some of those moments for you, if any? That, hey, this is when I hit a wall or hit a bump or hit a fork in the road.
One story popped into my head that I haven't shared before. I think it's kind of close to what you're asking for, but I want to share it anyway
Yeah,
because
all right.
it's funny for me. I always think about it by myself. So I was in the throes of prototyping, and one of the things that some of my classmates had said is, "Hey, sometimes the base of it slides on the table. So, you know, the glider works great, but sometimes the base slides, and we want it to be more grippy on the treatment table." Okay, so I'm looking through different ways to make it tackier on the bottom. Do I use different rubber feet? Like, how do we make this so it doesn't slide? And so I'm prototyping around, and I'm working with a guy in Westchester, PA, which is like 45 minutes from my house. And he's doing all the plastic design, which we were 3D printing at the time. And so I got a couple of prototypes, and I'm going to go drive over to his house to look through what he's done up on computer animated design. And I throw a couple next levels to bring a couple next levels to show him. And I'm like probably halfway there on the drive. And some guy, I don't know what kind of accent he had. We're from Philadelphia, so I don't know I don't think this was a Philadelphia accent. But I'm driving, and I had my window down. He's like, some guy pulls up alongside of me driving. He's like, "What's on your roof? What's on your roof?" And I was like, "What? Excuse me?
Oh no.
Your roof, your roof." And then he motions and points to the car roof. And I was like, "Oh, geez, I have no idea." And I looked up, and I reached out, and I felt the next level, a prototype sitting on the roof, and it hadn't moved. I've been driving for 30 minutes,
Oh my
worried
God.
about this, you know, this new grippiness of the bottom of the device. And so that confirmed that, you know, through all that chaos, it confirmed that I had gotten a grippier system on the bottom.
Wow.
So I mean, it was just like so ridiculous that it hadn't came off so far. And yeah, that
Necessity
was
is the
a
mother of
kicker.
invention, and sometimes solutions present themselves to you, not the other way around.
Yeah, you know, it got tested in the wild, and it worked.
How'd you validate the market? I mean, it sounds as if you reached out to five friends. I mean, I feel like the first validation, right, it's from the parents, but that doesn't count because they're your parents. I feel like the first validation was your neighbor you talked about says, "Hey, man, I like this. I want to buy it." And then you sent it to your friends, and your friends' patients wanted to buy it. But how did you? I mean, that's friends, and that's one level removed. How'd you sit down and say, "I'm going to validate the market for this"? What'd you do? What can someone learn from this to initially sort of test the waters and figure out, when you really put gas in this thing, which way am I going to point this boat?
Yeah. I don't know if there was one moment. I mean, one of the guys that one of my friends I sent a device to, after a while, I was like, "Hey, do you want to ask your clinic if he wants to buy this?" Because I was really strapped for cash, and I needed to get that prototype back to send it
Sure.
to another clinic. And my friend said, "Hey, he doesn't want to give it back. Well, can you buy it?" I was like, "Oh, the clinic wants to keep it. Interesting." So initially, I always thought the clinic would be our primary market.
Okay.
So the clinicians would get to use this for their patients. There, whatever, 3, 4, 5 patients come in with neck pain probably every day to most clinics. So I thought there would be a pretty strong market there. And I think obviously they're going to be doing some neck strengthening, some neck stretching. So that was my focus, selling to clinics. And we had already sold a couple to different clinics. So that was enough for me. I had felt that pain of doing resistance bands in the clinic. A couple clinics had bought it. That was really all I needed. What was awesome was after about, I don't know, 2 or 3 months where we are on the market with our flagship product. We called it the next level device because I didn't think about marketing it at all. And I called it the device, and it was just silly to look back at that. And then some patients started to buy it. And Jimmy, this was $900. These were all made in Philadelphia by hand, by myself. My friend would 3D print the different parts. I'd put them together. We'd had a metal working place nearby. That's where we get the metal parts. It was like really like surprising that it could all come together, but it was over $200 for a device for me to make. And so we sold them for like $900. And some patients were buying it at $900, which was like, I kind of like, that gave me some pause, of course, because, who is this really helping? Like, yeah, it's helping the clinician in that they have an easier time doing neck rehab. Like they have a better tool for their toolbox. The emotional receiver of this, the person who truly benefits is the patient who has neck pain and maybe they don't after. Because that's what we found was like there was something missing where this gravity eliminated neck strengthening really seemed to get patients over a hump. So then they'd want one for home. And eventually I realized, wait, there are 70,000 clinics in the US, but how many people with neck issues are there in the US, in the world? And they're already signaling to me that they want this. Of course, most couldn't buy it at $900, but some were. And so eventually, probably about 2 years of trying to stay in the clinic, I wanted to keep focusing on B2B, but I just kept getting pulled towards B2C, 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 D2C, direct to consumer. And my PT roots, even like, being a clinician, wanting to serve other clinicians, like there was a lot of momentum and inertia keeping me on presenting to clinics, going to CSM, like all that stuff was home. It was really easy to talk to clinicians. And I was scared that I would be judged if we moved this product to a D2C product to the consumer world, because I thought PTs would be like, oh, well, it's not going to substitute for all of the different neck
therapy or whatever
you can't get manual therapy. And I really thought that was going to be a big issue and something that I'd have to I would lose sleep over.
Sure.
And once I got over that, and sure, I'm sure there's some PTs that think like that.
Sure.
Once I got over that, things have been coasting.
But what was the response? Like, what did other PTs say? Because I feel like your audience for this product isn't a clinic or a consumer. The answer is both.
Yes, it is both. And that's it's both a blessing and a curse because I don't know where to focus. Every single day I'm pulled in both directions. And, business 101 is pick your market and stick to it and drill down on that, double down on it, then triple down on that. And so it's been a real challenge for me as to where to focus. We found that, speaking of what did clinicians think, clinicians started asking me, hey, can you make a home model? My patients really want one, but they can't afford the pro model. Can you make one? And so that was a nice, kick in the butt to make a home model for them. And so really it is this hybrid business now where if we put a device into the clinic, then, hundreds of PT patients are going to get to use it. Sure. And then some go on to buy it for home. So it's a beautiful model if you think about it.
It's the ultimate test drive model, right? Hey, check this thing out. Oh my gosh, how could, if you'd like to have this at home, you start putting QR codes right on the side of it. Like if you'd like to have yours, the clinician can just go, hey, right here is my personal QR code. And maybe I get an affiliate bump from that too. And now you're not in opposition of other clinicians saying, this is in competition with me or not as good as me. Now you're both rowing in the same direction, which is, hey, seeing a physical therapist is fantastic. This is one thing you could and should be doing at home. I find it akin to giving someone some resistance bands or suggesting some weights or giving them a pulley or something to do at home, because we know doing it 1 or 2 or 3 times a week with us is good. We want them to do it more. And this allows you to do that clunky movement that wasn't right, but is powerful if it's done right, to do it more.
Exactly. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah. I like that. I like the test drive phrasing.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful way to think
It's
about it.
it's show better than tell. I mean, your website's great and it can show off a lot of things and you can do some great marketing videos. It's a very visual and moving product, but someone putting their head down there and doing that with the guidance of a skilled physical therapist, even better in a clinic
Yeah.
environment, and say, hey, if I show you how to do this properly, you could take this out and put a couple miles on it in the next couple of weeks. I think this could be a good fit for you. That feels like a really great intersection of technology, business, and clinical care. I mean, I don't know that the three come together any better than that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And as PTs at heart, I was at my first trade show ever was at CSM, and I was talking to a bunch of sales guys, like seasoned salespeople, not PTs,
Got it.
and they were like, "Yeah, you PTs, you got the Peace Corps gene," and I was
Want to
like,
give it away.
"Yeah, I do. I hate selling things. I just want to give it away."
Yep.
Exactly right. This Peace Corps gene is inside me, and I can't get rid of it. And so that's something I've battled with the whole time. And the way that represents itself now is like, we have a 60-day return policy where I want someone that's bought it to like use it for 2 months before they have to decide if they want to keep it. If they don't want to keep it, it's a full refund. We give them a return label. Like that kind of stuff is where the PT in me still shows up.
Yeah.
Obviously, if they're in the clinic, they get to try it as much as they want. So yeah, it's funny how a PT becomes a business person, but you can't fully let all the Peace Corps gene out.
Yeah. Well, you've got to be able to support yourself. I mean, I think most people understand what a business is. Hey, listen, if it costs you X to make it, I expect to pay more for that because otherwise you can't be in business. But me coming to PT from a second career in media and communications, I definitely saw that Peace Corps gene. I would look around at clinicians, I would look around at associations or organizations and say, you have X value. You have to be able to do, if you allow access or you sell that, it's okay to make money so you can support yourself. Now, what's not okay is to gouge someone. But the great part of a free market system is if you said this thing's going to be $3,000, the market would decide that the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. And someone deciding, hey, if this thing's worth $900, if someone's in really bad pain and this makes them feel better, they're saying the pain is worth more than $900 if this makes it go away forever or for a short amount of time, or I believe in this thing to help me get out of pain. That's a powerful thing. That's a powerful intersection to be in. I hope more PTs understand this.
Yes, and it didn't come overnight. It has to take time for sure. But as you put on your business person hat and you look at the numbers more and more and more,
Yeah.
you realize how things need to shape up. There's just no way around the fact that you have to run a business. You have to make a profit. You have to be able to pay yourself.
Sure.
I remember I met with a mentor now, and he was just someone who was willing to talk to me. He was a local PT, sorry, not a PT, local entrepreneur. He had invented a light cure system, the grade 4 laser. And I was like, Brian, this is really exciting. I think I have a business. This is like 3 years ago. I think I have a business. We're going to be profitable for the first time this year. I was so used to losing money every year. And he was like, oh yeah, are you paying yourself? I was like, no. Why?
Oh,
He's
no.
like, you don't have a business. You don't have a business. I was like, oh, I have to be able to pay myself and make a profit for it to be a business.
Yep.
It's like these like super obvious moments where like you take off your PT hat and you learn what the real world's like,
Yep. Yeah. It's simple. And that's what I want these episodes to look at, right? Is Scott had an idea, tested it out a little bit, found someone, made it, and now it's a thing. It's simple to describe that, but it's not easy because there's other steps along the way. And there's things that trip you up. And there's things that, patenting or business or setting up a corporation or how do I market it or what do I even call the damn thing? Even when I have Next Level, is it Next Level device? Yeah. So how did it grow from Next Level, sort of your pro model, as you alluded to? So now there's a take-home model. What else is in the lineup? And then as much as you want to tell me, because we want to make sure if there's things down the line that you don't want people to know, I always tell people, don't tell Jimmy that. Jimmy doesn't want to know the secret because I'll wind up saying it not on purpose. But how did things progress? And then what do you think's in the future?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the hallmark moments in our company's history was when we got featured on Netflix on the quarterback documentary.
Yeah.
And episode 3, minute 8, if you want to watch, Patrick Mahomes is using the Next Level, and I'm like, this is surreal. My friend's friend texted my friend right when the documentary came out. He's like, "Isn't that your friend's device?" And then my friend texted me, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's crazy." And so, that was a big moment for us. Obviously, we blew that up as much as we could on social media. I would say like that was a really validating moment
Sure.
because up to that time, we had sold dozens to pro sports teams, but never before could we show like, hey, look at the top athletes using this on Netflix. Like that's a totally different scenario than to say, yeah, the Eagles were the first pro sports team to buy it, and they were actually our first official customer. Like that means something. There's some weight to that to say it out loud, but I have nothing to show for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But man, that Netflix feature was huge. So with that, I realized we needed some money. We needed money bad to develop real production quality devices. Where you use injection molded plastic instead of 3D printed plastic.
Mhm.
Like a lot of things had to change, and there's a lot of upfront capital, a lot of upfront money needed to make that happen. So a big moment was when I decided, hey, we need to raise some money. And so for 6 months, I changed from being a salesman to trying to sell devices to being a salesman for the company and saying, hey, look what we've done. We think we can do way better. We just need some more money. And so I raised almost $500,000 over 6 months around this idea. I don't think we had even had Mahomes at that point. No, we hadn't. So, we were raising on the fact that we were in a few hundred clinics. We've sold to several pro sports teams, and there's this giant market for people with neck issues.
Yep.
And so once we had the money, then we could go and I got connected with a really good manufacturer who, Jimmy. I was introduced to them through your current employer, Vestibular First.
Oh, yeah.
And so that changed everything because the right manufacturer changes everything in the world of hardware. Otherwise,
And what
goodness
did it do?
gracious.
Did it bring costs down in decrease speed or increase speed, decrease wait time, things like that?
It was the skill and the quality of their ability to manufacture the device well and consistently and at a lower price. So like all of that they're just the pros. It's like going to seeing a seasoned
Yeah.
clinician and you tell them your problem and they know right away what's going on. It's like that warm feeling you get when you
Yeah, yeah.
find the right
You're in the
person.
right spot.
I'm in the right spot. So that was huge. And we've put a bunch of money towards developing the molds and buying thousands of devices, which is so scary.
I
Like,
bet.
boy, if this doesn't work,
You're gonna have a garage full of things that are gonna remind you of failure every day.
yeah, a warehouse. So we filled up an entire shipping container, like
Wow.
one of those giant 40-foot long containers. We filled up an entire one of those before we launched our devices. What's that? 4 months ago, April 10th, we launched all our new products, which is one new home model, so the Next Level Glide. Then we launched a new professional model, the Next Level Glide Pro. And with the Pro model, we have a wall mount so that clinicians can use it in standing and sitting as well. Because a lot of clinicians were giving us the feedback over the
Good.
years that, hey, we'd love to use this in standing and sitting as well. So we listened to all that. We need a home model. We need to be able to use it in standing, sitting. And that's what we did. And so it's been 4 months of Jimmy actually having a business.
There you
I
go.
didn't want to pay myself. I
Yeah.
was scared to death of paying myself before the revenue supported it. So I raised on the fact that I wouldn't take any money of any investor money towards my salary. So I didn't make any money for like a year and a half because I was out of the clinic because the investors wanted me full time on this.
Sure, sure,
And so
sure.
I was at the parents' house, really committed to this whole thing working. And so we're 4 months into it actually working.
Wow.
We're selling devices every single day. I'm paying myself, and it feels like knock on wood moment, like this has actually worked. And it's actually been worth all the effort. And the reviews on the website, like we'll get a couple reviews every day now. That is where like you've put the effort in the right
Yep.
place, where it's this person who I've never met. They bought a device, and with the training that we provided included with each device, they were able to help themselves from their house. And maybe they had been to PT clinics, maybe they had injection surgery before, and they'll write all this in the reviews, and it's just amazing to see what can be done from a distance. So it's like really like I scaled my physical therapy hands.
Do those reviews finally help that feeling that you didn't want to have in your stomach in terms of making sure this was about helping people. Like now you're hearing it from the people that your hands would have never, as you just mentioned, you would have never heard from this person in, Idaho, but there's someone in Idaho who feels a little better today than they did yesterday because you had the idea and you went through some knots in your stomach and some sleepless nights, I imagine, and some putting your money where your mouth is. And so is that the real, I mean, of course, getting paid and creating a business and a life for yourself and flexibility is fantastic. But how much of a reward is that? I mean, that's just got to feel fantastic.
You connect dots for me that I'm unable to connect. So thank you, Jimmy. I'm really happy we're talking. The first like month or so, we weren't really getting product reviews. The email system just wasn't functioning properly,
Right.
and it was really stressing me out
'Cause you're
because I had
yeah.
no idea how my quote unquote, my patients
Right.
were doing.
Right.
Right. If I'm in the clinic, I know exactly how they're doing right when they walk in the door, but I had no idea if I was helping them. And so like now everything's moving well. Every time I get that review, it's like when you just discharge a patient and it just went swimmingly.
Yeah.
It's like that moment over and over and over again. It does feel incredible, and
Right.
it makes me feel like I deserve the revenue that was generated.
Good. And that's what I think PTs, I think that's the Peace Corps gene. But what I think the Peace Corps gene does is we don't want to take more than we're giving. It's like the giving tree. It's like we're only supposed to take one apple, right? Not two, because one is what we decided is even and worth it. But when you can feel that the juice is worth a squeeze, like, hey, I gave $2,000 worth of value, but I charged you 500. That's okay. That's good. You can't do zero, right? You can't do zero. Well, you can't do zero forever. And this doesn't mean you can't do something. Because I had a funny social media interaction with someone when I said, the famous cliche is if you're good at something, never do it for free. And someone was like, well, does that mean you can't do pro bono work? And I said, I feel very rewarded when I do pro bono work. I get paid highly when I do something with a business or a mission trip. Trust me, that cliche of when you go on a mission trip and you get more than you gave, so cliche. It's true though. Like I really did feel like I got a whole lot more. And I hope that I hope people listening to this or watching this are taking away like, oh, if that's the thing limiting us, because I think there's a lot of untapped potential in our profession. I know that there is, because we're going to have 5 episodes this week only on that. I want them to get over that thing because I know that it holds a lot of people up. It does. Charging money for some, even for clinical care. We want to be able to pay our bills, but sliding someone a bill or saying this is what you owe us, like it's, I mean, again, I'm like half a PT, right? Because I came from media and then became a PT. It still hurts me, and I'm only half a PT, right? We got to get over that because what we can do with a product or our minds or our hands or our insights is terribly powerful.
It's really powerful, and that's what I've been trying to, as the little platform I have has grown, is I've been trying to signal and show PTs like, hey, you now have a superpower. You can heal people's pain. That's a really big deal. You can identify the problem and you can fix the problem, 8, 9 times out of 10. That's really valuable. And that value doesn't need to be provided only in the clinic.
Correct.
You can do that in several different ways.
Correct.
And so how can you use your creativity to use this superpower that you now have acquired? I really believe that is so valuable. When you tell someone you're a physical therapist out, at a party or whatever, they'll always be like, oh, my shoulder or whatever, because they know you have a power that they don't have. And
they know you have the
some
power.
exercise.
Where I think the disconnect sometimes is, and of course, I look at things through my lens because I'm a communications guy. The next step is really important. So we're at a party and you say, hey, I'm Scott, I'm a PT. And I go, oh man, my shoulder. The next sentence or the next thing that you do to communicate, hey, help me understand more about this, to lead them to a solution, whether it's a product or a video or one-on-one treatment. That's the thing, is when we expect people to understand the distance between what they know and what we know. You have to recognize what they know and what they don't know, and then tease out, how do I lead you to, and this doesn't mean, I know it sounds bad, selling something, but change selling to just communicate. Because ultimately, we might make suggestions, but they make decisions. And if you've suggested something and they've decided that's a path I want to go on, who are we to say no? That's exactly why we went to school. Yeah. So you mentioned something a second ago about having a platform. And I'm sure having the success that you've had, you get questions from PTs or other people in and out of the profession. Hey, maybe they're sheepishly, so I sort of have an idea too, and back of the napkin. So is there any advice? Is there, because we have, I don't want to get too specific, but is there universal advice that you might give to someone who's like, hey, I got this feeling too. Your story resonated with me. What do you sort of say to people? Are there one or two pieces of advice that you usually share?
It happens way more than I ever anticipated.
Okay,
There are a
cool.
lot of PTs with ideas, a lot, and some of them reach out. And the first thing I always tell them is exactly what my mentor told me, who was a PT and an inventor that I met in PT school. He said, "Scott, it's going to hurt twice as much as you think it's going to. It's going to cost twice as much as you think it's going to, and it's going to take twice as long as you think it's going to." And I just have raised the ante since then. Maybe he's better than I am, but for me, it's 10x, all that
Yeah.
10x. It's really, really hard. And for whatever reason, when he said that to me, that inspired me. Like that got me going. I'm an athlete. Like I like to
Yeah.
compete. Like that got me going. And so I always let them know up front, like, this is not an easy road. If you're looking for a cruiser, do not do this one.
Yep.
Do something else, please. But it can be extremely rewarding, and I'm lucky enough because of, I think, timing and just whatever universal luck that this has worked out. No one else had thought of it or had got it to market yet. Like things just kind of worked out. Neck strengthening, like as an interest of clinicians and the regular population was like on the rise. So there are a lot of things really worked out. So a lot of luck was required. Anyway, so the advice I give to PTs is follow and I have a roadmap that I've posted about on LinkedIn a lot. And that is, if you have a true idea where you think it's an invention, do a patent search. So you just go on Google Patents and you search around and see if anybody else has invented it, or at least if there's a patent for it. Once you have that, like once you think you're in the clear, and even if there's some gray area, I would still encourage you to go for it, because you never know what happens. Like
Sure.
still try out things. So then make a first prototype. For me, that was a skateboard. I got lucky, super easy hardware product with a similar device already on the market.
Yep.
So I already had that and I used it. But that's what you have to do. You have to get a prototype and you have to learn if you're onto something, because you'll learn pretty quick if you're onto something. Hopefully the prototype doesn't take a lot of money up front to make it. Usually you can get around and make an ugly thing that functions enough that you'll have an idea. So if you get that green light, then you got to put other people on it. And once you have that, like the confidence, maybe you've sold a couple ugly prototypes, that kind of thing. Once you have that confidence, then you go in an order that I did not go.
Okay.
I learned that you have to then go to a skilled manufacturer to design the product for manufacturing and scalability. I did not do that. I went through the process of how can I make this for as cheap and as like reasonably priced as I can in the Philadelphia market.
Right.
And that turned out to be not super wise, but I learned a lot for those 2 years that it was on the market. I learned exactly what it had to do. I built every one, probably 500 by hand. I knew exactly what it had to do. So it was valuable for me. Anyway, so you get through prototyping. You think you're onto something. You get to a skilled manufacturer who can make it to the T scalably. Then after that, once you have the design, then you submit that for a patent application. So you submit the patent application to the USPTO. Some people will say you should, a year before then, file a provisional patent, which buys you a year of time before you submit the final non-provisional patent. That's totally your call. But once you've submitted the patent, then you're in patent pending phase. That is exactly where you want to be, because then you can speak the word of the device. You can talk about it. You don't have to worry about non-disclosure agreements, that kind of stuff. And you can get as many people onto it, and you can start to sell it. Hopefully you can get through the manufacturing process. So that's all one big marathon. I'm out of breath talking about that marathon.
Yeah. Simple, not easy.
Simple, not easy. And then you go into the marketing marathon, and that's just a conversation for a whole nother day. But that is
But you brought someone on to work with that, correct?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's been so many people that have helped with marketing along the way. And I think the most important thing for you to do, if you're interested in marketing something, is you have to start to like open your eyes and take it in how the world is being marketed to you. like every single product, like every single day, you're getting exposed to
Thousands of messages.
thousands of little pieces of marketing.
They're right in front of you. Take them,
all
look
right
at
there.
them, dissect them, flip, and then steal
Absorb.
what you like and leave the rest and see what fits. I tell people that all the time. I'll work with big companies and they'll, I learned this. The concept is called 10-80-10. So if I worked for Scott, I don't need Scott over my shoulder every day. And Scott doesn't want to be over my shoulder every day. Scott wants to hire me and then I go do things. But here's the problem. Right now we have a distance between what you have in your head and your heart that maybe you can't communicate and what I understand or what I'll do. So I invite Scott in for the first 10%. This is where you vomit at me. Just give me everything. Feelings, emotionals, things you definitely want, things you definitely do not want, right? Mm-hmm. One of the exercises I do is exactly what you just said. Hey, in the next 7 days, you don't need to, we're not going to create a Google Drive folder. That's too complicated. Even that's too complicated. I want you, every time you're around a marketing message that you love or hate, screenshot it. At the end of the week, send me all the screenshots or take a photo. If it's a bus or something on TV, take a video and then we're going to sit down. We're going to do love and hate and we're going to figure out what you look like and feel like, sound like, and smell like. And then we're going to know it because you're going to go, that's it. And I'm going to go, great. I've got a physical representation of that. And then I go do the 80% of the work. That's the lift. That's the middle of the bell curve. But then I let Scott in on the last 10% because I want to make sure before we ship that thing, it's dialed in. So I let you touch the first 10%. I let you go to the store with me to get the ingredients. Definitely use that. Definitely don't use that. Mm-hmm. And the last 10%, we're sanding down the edges. We know we're close because you gave me the ingredients. I can only cook them a certain number of ways, but I want to make sure before we ship, you don't like it, you love it. But the thing I wanted to hit was, it sounds like, that's why I wanted to bring up, you brought someone in for marketing. We can have that discussion later. We'll do that on a live stream. That's what we'll talk about. That'll be our added bonus follow-up. Follow us on YouTube for the live stream for that. But you went and found someone who was an expert in something that needed to be done that you couldn't do. I mean, you could have dropped everything you were doing and learned, manufacturing for 10 years, but that's not what you wanted to be doing. So you found an expert. And in PT terms, my friend, that is a referral. You said, I'm going to send this product and I'm going to refer out. And when it comes back to me, you've got a skill set I don't have, but we'll work for a common goal. And that's terribly. So what I wanted to say was, when you were saying, well, if I wanted to get it done as cheaply and locally as possible, that cheap option costs you a lot, doesn't it?
Oh, a lot of time.
Yeah. And money because you got to pay twice as much to get half the result or a quarter of the result. Yeah. And it feels like it's a good option, but a lot of times it's not. We try to communicate that with PT as well, right? Hey, listen, I know I might seem expensive, but what's worth you not being able to work for 3-4 weeks or months? Here, let me show you how, if I can get you back together, you'll actually be better off paying this crazy expensive physical therapist of why they should be helping you, because we can unlock things. A lot of messages there. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
All right. So we're going to follow this up. Where do you want people to go to connect with you? You mentioned you're on LinkedIn. So people look you up on LinkedIn. We'll share that link as well. The website that you'd want to send people to, I would love, here's why I know success. Someone listens to this now or whenever they're hearing this, because that's how podcasts work. That's how great it is. We put this out to the world. And in a couple of years, someone writes you an email or me an email and says, I heard that episode you did with Scott, and here's what I did. And they send me a link to their product that they made, that they've been swirling around in their head, but didn't looking for that green light. This is your green light, people. If you're listening to this and you're still listening 49 minutes in, this is your green light to go do that thing, because it happens. Why not you?
Why not you?
Last thing we do on the show is the parting shot. You got to sum it up, man. No pressure. But what would you want to leave with the audience as we wrap up today?
Oof. I would say taking the hard path that will challenge you will be far more rewarding than you can imagine.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, man. I was told not to launch a podcast. That was 9.5 years ago, and I'm still doing this thing, and it's kind of a business now. Who knew? Scott Dickinson, appreciate it. Thanks for doing what you do and sharing all your insight, man.
Yeah, hey, really honored to be on here. Thanks, Jimmy.